They say that some wounds are invisible, carved not into flesh, but into the foundation of who we are. I never imagined that at 53 years old, I'd find myself sitting alone in my carefully decorated living room, wondering how the children I raised with every ounce of love I possessed could look at me with such disappointment in their eyes. My name is Vivian Torres, and this is the story of how I went from being called the best mom ever to becoming the villain in my own children's narratives, and how I finally learned to stop apologizing for mistakes I'm not sure I even made. But what I didn't know then was that the truth would unravel in ways I never expected, revealing secrets that would shake our family to its very core. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning in September. I remember because it was trash day, and I was dragging the bins to the curb when my phone rang. It was my daughter, Celeste, 34 years old, with a master's degree in marketing and a beautiful apartment in the city that she could barely afford. She didn't even say hello. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something my therapist and I have been working through." I felt a knot form in my stomach immediately. There's something about that particular phrase, "my therapist and I," that has become code for brace yourself for an attack. I wiped my hands on my jeans and sat down on the front steps, phone pressed against my ear. "Of course, sweetheart. What's going on?" What followed was a 40-minute conversation that felt like being slowly dismembered. According to Celeste, her inability to assert herself at work stemmed from my dismissive parenting style, her struggles with body image. That came from the time I suggested she might want to try a different dress for her 8th grade formal. Her difficulty trusting men in relationships? Well, that was because I had modeled dysfunctional relationship patterns during my marriage to her father. Start paragraph. I sat there on those cold concrete steps, listening to my daughter rewrite our entire history together, and I didn't recognize a single scene she was describing. In her version, I was critical, controlling, emotionally distant. In my memory, I was a young mother working 2 jobs, showing up to every school play, making homemade Halloween costumes at midnight, holding her hair back when she was sick, celebrating every achievement, no matter how small. Start. "Mom, are you even listening to me?" "Yes, baby, I'm listening. I'm trying to understand." Start. "That's the problem, Mom. You never really listened. You were always too busy or too tired or too focused on Nathan. Do you know what it's like to feel invisible in your own family?" Nathan is my son, 2 years younger than Celeste. He was the easier child, I'll admit that. Where Celeste was dramatic and emotional, Nathan was laid back and content. But invisible? I had never thought of her that way. She was my firstborn, my fierce little warrior who could light up a room just by walking into it. After we hung up, I sat on those steps for another hour, watching the neighbors go about their ordinary mornings, taking out their trash, walking their dogs, living their uncomplicated lives. I felt something shift inside me that morning, a hairline fracture in the foundation of my identity as a mother. But that was just the beginning. 3 weeks later, Nathan called. My 32-year-old son, who'd been living with his girlfriend Emma for 5 years but refused to propose, had something to tell me too. Apparently, he had started seeing a therapist as well, and they had uncovered the root cause of his commitment issues. "It goes back to watching you and Dad fight all the time," he explained, his voice careful, like he was talking to a child. "I learned that marriage equals misery. That's why I can't take that step with Emma. Every time I think about proposing, I just see you and Dad screaming at each other in the kitchen." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked quietly, "Nathan, your father and I divorced when you were 21. You were in college. You were an adult. That doesn't mean it didn't affect me, Mom. Trauma doesn't have an age limit." Trauma. That word that used to mean something serious, war, abuse, tragedy, had somehow expanded to include normal family conflict. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not dismissing my children's pain. But when did every difficult moment become trauma? When did every imperfect parent become an abuser? I started keeping a journal after that call with Nathan. I needed to document my own memories before they were completely overwritten by my children's therapy-approved versions. I wrote about the years after their father left, when I was 28 years old with 2 small children and a mortgage I could barely pay. I wrote about the 70-hour work weeks that allowed me to keep them in their school district, in their home, in their routine. I wrote about missing Nathan's baseball games because I was working a second job so we could afford his baseball equipment. In my journal, those sacrifices looked like love. In my children's therapy sessions, apparently they looked like abandonment. The accusations started coming more frequently after that. Sunday dinners, which had been our tradition for years, became interrogations. Celeste would bring up some incident from her childhood, examining it like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Nathan would chime in with his own interpretation, and I would sit there at the head of the table. The pot roast I'd spent all afternoon cooking growing cold, wondering when I had become the defendant in my own home. "Remember when you made me quit dance classes in middle school?" Celeste asked one Sunday, her fork hovering over her untouched plate. "Sweetheart, we couldn't afford them anymore. I had just lost my job at the hospital, and you always have an excuse, Mom. But do you know what message that sent to me? That my dreams didn't matter, that I wasn't worth investing in." I looked at Nathan for support, but he was studying his phone, deliberately staying out of it. "Celeste, I worked 3 jobs the next year to pay for your dance camp. Remember? The summer intensive you wanted so badly?" She shrugged. That was different. And anyway, by then, the damage was done. I had already internalized that I wasn't worthy. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood there looking at my reflection in the mirror. At 53, I could see my mother looking back at me. The same lines around the eyes, the same gray streaking through dark hair. My mother, who had raised 6 children in a 2-bedroom house, who had never missed a day of work in 30 years, who had died without ever hearing thank you from half of her kids. Was this my future? Growing old while my children cataloged my failures? If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Because these stories matter, and your experiences matter too. I started noticing it everywhere once I became aware of it. At the coffee shop, a young woman complaining to her friend about her narcissistic mother, who had the audacity to ask when she was going to find a stable job. At the grocery store, a man around Nathan's age on the phone, explaining to someone that his anxiety disorder was directly caused by his parents' high expectations. In my book club, where 3 out of 7 women had adult children who blamed them for everything from failed marriages to credit card debt. It's like they've forgotten we're human, my friend Patricia said one evening over wine. Her daughter hadn't spoken to her in 6 months because Patricia had offered unsolicited advice about her grandchild's sleeping schedule. We raised them to be independent thinkers. And now they think independently that we're terrible people. We laughed, but it was the kind of laughter that keeps you from crying. Then something happened that changed everything. I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize on a Wednesday afternoon. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Vivian Torres?" The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Dr. Miranda Chen. I'm a therapist, and I'm calling because one of my clients has given me permission to reach out to you. Your daughter, Celeste." My heart started pounding. "Is she okay? What's wrong?" "She's fine, physically. But we've been working through some issues, and something has come up in our sessions that I think you need to be aware of. Would you be willing to come in for a joint session?" I agreed immediately, my mind racing with possibilities. What could be so serious that Celeste's therapist needed to call me directly? The session was scheduled for the following Monday. I barely slept for the next 5 days, running through every possible scenario in my mind. Had I done something even worse than I thought? Was there some repressed memory that had surfaced? Was Celeste planning to cut me out of her life entirely? When I arrived at Dr. Mei Chen's office, Celeste was already there, sitting on a cream-colored couch, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. I wanted to rush to her, to hold her, but something in her body language told me to keep my distance. Dr. Chen was a petite woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. She gestured for me to sit in the chair across from Celeste. "Thank you for coming, Vivienne. I know this must be confusing for you." "It is," I said, looking at Celeste. "Baby, what's going on?" Celeste's hands were shaking. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Dr. Chen spoke gently. "Celeste, do you want to tell your mother what we discussed? Or would you like me to?" Celeste's voice was barely a whisper. "I'll tell her." She took a deep breath. "Mom, do you remember Aunt Lorraine?" We hadn't spoken in over 15 years, not since a falling out over our mother's estate after she passed away. Lorraine had accused me of manipulating our mother into leaving me more money, which wasn't true. Mom had made her own decisions. The accusation had cut so deep that I'd severed all contact. Of course I remember her. Why? I've been in contact with her for the past 6 months. I felt like I'd been slapped. What? Why would you? Because I wanted to understand our family history. I wanted to know why you and she stopped talking. I wanted to hear her side of the story. My throat tightened. "And what did she tell you?" Celeste finally looked at me, and what I saw in her eyes wasn't anger. It was confusion, pain, and something that looked almost like betrayal. "She told me things, Mom. Things about you, about Dad, about why you really got divorced." My blood ran cold. "Celeste, whatever Lorraine told you, she said Dad didn't cheat on you. She said you cheated on him with his business partner. She said that's why the divorce was so messy. Why Dad moved across the country and barely stayed in touch with us. Because he was so hurt by what you did that he couldn't stand to be around you, and we reminded him too much of you." The room seemed to tilt. This was my worst nightmare, coming to life. The secret I had buried for over a decade, the truth I had protected my children from because I thought it would hurt them less to believe their father had been the one to betray our family. "That's not," I started, but Dr. Chen held up a hand. "Vivienne, before you respond, I want you to know that Celeste has been carrying this information for 3 months. She's been processing it, trying to understand what it means, trying to figure out who to believe. This is why I called you, because I think it's time for the truth, whatever that truth is." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw the little girl who used to think I hung the moon. The little girl who would crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and tell me I was the bravest person in the world. That little girl was gone, replaced by a woman who thought her mother was a liar and a hypocrite. "Celeste," I said, my voice shaking, "your Aunt Lorraine is right. I did have an affair, but the story is more complicated than what she told you." Celeste's face crumpled. Even though she'd heard it from Lorraine, hearing it from me made it real. "How could you, Mom? You let us believe Dad was the bad guy all these years. You let us think he abandoned us." "He did abandon you," I said, my own voice rising. "Baby, listen to me. Yes, I made a terrible mistake, but your father had been having an affair for 2 years before I even knew about it. When I found out, I was devastated. I was 26 years old with 2 small children, and the man I loved had been living a double life. So you got revenge." Celeste's voice was bitter. "That's your excuse?" "No, that's not." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "When I confronted your father about his affair, he told me he wanted a divorce. He said he'd fallen in love with someone else. Someone who didn't have stretch marks and baby weight. Someone who wasn't exhausted all the time from raising his children. He said he felt trapped by our family. Dr. Chen leaned forward. Vivian, what happened next? He moved out. This was before the official divorce. He went to live with his girlfriend, and I was left alone with you and Nathan. You were 6. Nathan was 4. I was working full-time and trying to keep everything together, and I was falling apart. Your father's business partner, Richard, had been our friend for years. He and his wife used to come over for dinner parties. When your father left, Richard checked in on us. He helped me fix things around the house. He made sure we were okay. And then you slept with him, Celeste said flatly. It happened once. One time, in a moment of weakness and loneliness and desperate need to feel like I was worth something to someone. I was wrong. I knew it was wrong, even as it was happening, and I ended it immediately. I told Richard it could never happen again, and I told your father what I had done because I couldn't live with the guilt. Paragraph. And Dad couldn't forgive you, Celeste said. Strong period. Your father used my mistake to take the moral high ground. Suddenly, the divorce wasn't about his affair anymore. It was about mine. He told the court. He told our families. He told our friends. He made me out to be the villain, and I let him because I thought it would be easier for you children if there was a clear bad guy. And I was willing to be that person if it meant you could maintain some kind of relationship with your father. But he moved away anyway, Celeste whispered. Yes, because even with me taking all the blame, he still couldn't handle being a father. He still chose his new life over you and Nathan. And I never told you the full truth because I didn't want you to know that both of your parents had failed you. I wanted you to at least believe that one of us had tried to keep the family together. The silence in the room was deafening. Celeste was crying openly now, and I wanted to go to her, but I was frozen in place. So everything I've been working through in therapy, Celeste said slowly, all the blame I've been putting on you for being controlling and dismissive and absent, was based on a partial truth, Dr. Chen interjected gently. Celeste, this is what we talked about. People are rarely all good or all bad. Your mother made a serious mistake, but she also made countless sacrifices. Both things can be true. But she lied to us, Celeste said. For years, Nathan and I grew up thinking our father was the only one who betrayed the family. I'm sorry, I said, tears streaming down my face now. I'm so sorry, baby. I thought I was protecting you. I thought it would be easier if you had one parent to blame instead of 2. I thought if I could be strong enough, good enough, present enough, it would make up for your father's absence and my mistake. That's why you worked so hard, Celeste said, her voice breaking. That's why you were always so tired. You were trying to be both parents. I was trying to be enough, but I never was I? No matter how hard I worked, how many sacrifices I made, I could never be enough to make up for what I'd done. Dr. Chen handed tissues to both of us. This is important, both of you. Vivienne, you've been carrying guilt for a decade, trying to atone for a mistake by being a perfect mother, which is impossible. Celeste, you've been carrying anger about your childhood without knowing the full context. This is an opportunity for both of you to start fresh with the truth. But Celeste wasn't ready for fresh starts. She stood up abruptly. I need to go. I need to think about this. I need to talk to Nathan. Celeste, please, don't, Mom. I need space. She left, and I sat there in Dr. Chen's office, feeling like my world was collapsing. The secret I had kept to protect my children had become the very thing that might destroy our relationship forever. Sleep comes around, Dr. Chen said gently, but she needs time to process this. And Vivienne, you need to forgive yourself. You made a mistake 28 years ago. You don't have to keep punishing yourself for it. But I had been punishing myself, hadn't I? Every time my children accused me of being a bad mother, part of me believed them because I knew I had done something unforgivable. I had betrayed my marriage vows. I had given their father ammunition to paint me as the villain. And I had lied to them about it for their entire lives. I drove home in a daze and called Nathan. We need to talk. Celeste is going to tell you something, but I need you to hear it from me first. I told him everything. The phone was silent for so long after I finished that I thought the call had dropped. Nathan, are you still there? I'm here. His voice was tight. I'm just trying to process this. You've been letting us blame you for everything when Dad was just as much at fault? More at fault, I said. He left first, baby. He chose to blow up our family. I made a terrible mistake in response, but he started it. That sounds like something a child would say, Mom. Maybe it does, but it's true. And I'm tired of pretending it's not. Nathan was quiet again. Why didn't you tell us? We're adults now. We could have handled the truth. When would have been the right time? When you were teenagers, already struggling with your father's absence? In your 20s? When you were both trying to figure out your own relationships? I kept waiting for the right moment, and it never came. And now Aunt Lorraine forced your hand. Yes, your aunt, who has her own reasons for wanting to paint me as a terrible person. Did Celeste tell you that Lorraine tried to contest our mother's will? That she accused me of elder abuse? That she spread rumors about me to our entire extended family? No, she left that part out. Of course she did. Nathan, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not even saying I was a good person back then. But I've spent the last 28 years trying to make up for one mistake, and I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted from apologizing, from accepting blame for everything, from trying to be perfect when perfect doesn't exist. What are you saying, Mom? I'm saying I love you and your sister more than my own life. But I can't keep carrying all of this guilt. I can't keep being the villain in your stories when the truth is so much more complicated than that. We talked for another hour, and by the end, Nathan seemed to understand at least a little, but I could hear the hurt in his voice. The betrayal. Not because of what I had done 28 years ago, but because I had hidden it from him. The next few weeks were the darkest of my life. Celeste wouldn't return my calls. Nathan was distant and cold. I felt like I was losing both of my children. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. I threw myself into my work, into my painting, into anything that would distract me from the gaping hole where my family used to be. Patricia tried to get me to go out, to join her for coffee or lunch, but I couldn't face the world. I felt exposed, raw, like everyone could see my shame. Then one morning I received a text from an unknown number. This is Emma, Nathan's girlfriend. Can we meet for coffee? Please don't tell Nathan. I agreed immediately, desperate for any connection to my son. We met at a small cafe near her office, and she got right to the point. Nathan is falling apart, she said. He won't talk to me about what happened, but I know it has something to do with you and his father. He's been having nightmares, drinking too much, pulling away from me. My heart broke. I never wanted this. I was trying to protect them. I know. Nathan told me bits and pieces, and I did some reading between the lines. Mrs. Torres, can I be honest with you? Please. I think you've been letting your kids treat you like garbage for a long time. Nathan tells me stories about Sunday dinners where they basically put you on trial for being human. He talks about it like it's normal, like parents are supposed to just take abuse from their adult children. And I've been biting my tongue because it's not my place to say anything. But now I'm watching the man I love destroy himself over something that happened before he was old enough to remember it. And I think someone needs to say it. You made a mistake. One mistake, under terrible circumstances, nearly 30 years ago. That doesn't make you a monster. That makes you human. I started crying right there in the cafe, not caring who saw me. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for saying that. Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Nathan loves you. He's just hurt right now. But he'll come around. I'll make sure of it. Please don't push him. I don't want to come between you two. You're not coming between us, but I'm not going to stand by and watch him throw away his relationship with his mother over something his father did decades ago. His father. who, by the way, sends a card on Christmas and Nathan's birthday and has never once visited. That man doesn't deserve Nathan's loyalty, and I think Nathan is starting to realize that. Emma was true to her word. Over the next few weeks, she worked on Nathan, gently pushing him to see things from my perspective. And slowly, grudgingly, he started to soften. Meanwhile, Celeste was on her own journey. She had cut off contact with Aunt Lorraine after learning about the full extent of our falling out. She had also started questioning everything Lorraine had told her, doing her own research into our family history, talking to other relatives who remembered those years. What she discovered surprised her. Our cousin Rosa told her about how I had shown up at her house at 2 in the morning, crying hysterically. The night I found out about my husband's affair, Rosa's husband confirmed that my ex-husband had been seen around town with his girlfriend for months before the separation. Family friends came forward with stories of how my ex-husband had openly complained about being trapped by family life, how he had talked about leaving long before I had my affair. The picture that emerged was not the one Lorraine had painted. Yes, I had made a mistake. But I had been a young mother, betrayed and desperate, who had made one terrible choice in a moment of weakness. My ex-husband had made a series of deliberate choices to betray his family, and then he had used my mistake to absolve himself of all guilt. 2 months after the disastrous therapy session, Celeste showed up at my door unannounced. It was late evening, and I was in my painting studio, working on a piece that was all dark colors and harsh angles, a reflection of my emotional state. "Mom?" Her voice was small from the doorway. I turned, paintbrush in hand, afraid to hope. "Celeste, can we talk?" We sat in my living room, the same room where we'd had so many Sunday dinners, so many arguments, so many accusations. But this time felt different. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Celeste said, "and talking to people. And I owe you an apology." "Baby, no." "Okay, please let me finish. I've been so focused on my own pain, my own struggles, that I never stopped to think about yours. I never asked myself what it must have been like for you, 26 years old, with 2 small children, discovering that your husband had been cheating on you for years. I never considered how desperate and alone and broken you must have felt. That doesn't excuse what I did. Okay. No, it doesn't, but it explains it. And I've realized something, Mom. I've been holding you to an impossible standard. I've been expecting you to have been perfect, to have never made mistakes, to have handled every situation with wisdom and grace. But you were just a kid yourself when you had me. You were figuring things out as you went along, dealing with betrayal and heartbreak and financial stress, and still somehow managing to show up for Nathan and me every single day. I couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down my face. I talked to Aunt Jasmine, Celeste continued, Dad's sister. Do you know what she told me? She said Dad called her the night you told him about your affair. She said he laughed. He actually laughed and said, "Now I don't have to feel guilty anymore." She said he had been looking for an excuse to leave completely, and you gave it to him. Mom, he used your mistake as permission to abandon his children, and I've been punishing you for his choices. He's your father, Celeste. I never wanted to turn you against him. You didn't. He did that all by himself, by sending checks twice a year and calling on major holidays. I'm 34 years old, and I'm just now realizing that the parent I've been angry at is the one who stayed, who worked 3 jobs, who sacrificed everything. And the parent who actually abandoned me gets a pass because you let us believe a story that made you look worse than you were. We held each other and cried for a long time. When we finally pulled apart, Celeste said, "I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it, for blaming you for my problems, for not seeing how hard you worked, for believing Aunt Lorraine without getting your side of the story first. You have nothing to apologize for, baby. You were dealing with new information the best way you knew how. That's generous of you, but we both know I've been dealing with a lot more than just new information. I've been dealing with my own insecurities and failures, and it was easier to blame them on my childhood than to take responsibility for them. This felt like a turning point, but I knew better than to assume everything would be perfect from here on out. Healing is not a straight line. Over the next several months, Celeste and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. We had coffee dates where we talked about her life, not my past mistakes. We went to art galleries and movies. We laughed together for the first time in years. And gradually, the mother-daughter relationship I thought I had lost forever began to emerge again, stronger this time because it was built on truth instead of carefully maintained lies. Nathan took longer to come around. The revelation about my affair had shaken something fundamental in him. He had built his entire worldview around the idea that his father was the villain and I was the hero who had held everything together. Learning that we were both flawed, both guilty of betrayal, forced him to reconsider everything. Emma continued to be a bridge between us. She would text me with updates. He's making progress. He talked about you today without getting angry. He's starting to see the bigger picture. 6 months after the truth came out, Nathan showed up at my house with a bottle of wine and a request. "Can we talk, Mom? Really talk, not just surface stuff?" We talked for hours that night. He asked questions I had never wanted to answer. How long had the affair with Richard lasted? Once. Just once. Did I love Richard? No, I barely even liked myself during that time. Did I ever regret having children so young? Never, not for a single moment. Did I wish I had told them the truth earlier? Every single day. "Why didn't you fight back?" Nathan asked at one point. "When Celeste and I were blaming you for everything, why didn't you tell us the truth about Dad?" "Because you loved him, despite his absence. You held on to this idea of who he was, and I didn't want to take that away from you. I thought it was better for you to have one parent you could believe in, even if that meant I had to be the villain. That's messed up, Mom." "I know, but it's also kind of beautiful." He wiped his eyes. "I don't know if I would have been that selfless." "You would be. You'd be surprised what you're capable of when you love someone enough." Nathan set down his wine glass and looked at me seriously. "I want you to know something. I'm going to propose to Emma." My heart soared. "Nathan, that's wonderful. I realized something through all of this. I wasn't afraid of commitment because of your divorce. I was afraid of being vulnerable, of admitting I needed someone. Because needing someone means you can be hurt by them. And I saw how hurt you were when Dad left. But I also saw how you survived it. How you kept going, kept loving, kept showing up even when it would have been easier to give up. That's the lesson I should have been learning all along. Not that marriage is scary, but that love is worth the risk." If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel, and tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Your stories give other women strength, and your presence here matters more than you know. Just when I thought our family was finally healing, another bombshell dropped. It was Thanksgiving, and for the first time in years, I was hosting again. Both of my children would be there, along with Emma and Marcus, Celeste's boyfriend. I had spent days preparing, wanting everything to be perfect for this new chapter in our family's story. The doorbell rang at exactly 3 o'clock, and I expected to see Nathan and Emma. Instead, standing on my doorstep was a man I hadn't seen in over a decade. My ex-husband, Thomas Torres. He looked older, grayer, softer around the middle, but his eyes were the same, that cool blue that had once made my heart race, and later had looked at me with such contempt. "Hello, Vivienne." I couldn't speak. My hand was frozen on the doorknob. "May I come in?" The kids invited me. The kids. My children had invited their father to my Thanksgiving dinner without telling me. I wanted to slam the door in his face. I wanted to scream at him for everything he had done, everything he had taken from us. But I could see Nathan's car pulling up behind Thomas's rental, and I knew this was a moment that required grace, not anger. Of course, I said, stepping aside. The dinner was awkward beyond description. Thomas sat at one end of the table. I sat at the other, and our children filled the space between us with forced conversation and nervous laughter. Emma kept giving me sympathetic looks. Marcus seemed completely confused about the tension. Finally, over dessert, Thomas cleared his throat. I want to say something to everyone here. Vivienne, kids, I owe you all an apology. A real one, not the half-hearted sorry you were hurt kind. I was a terrible husband and an even worse father. I abandoned my family because I was a coward who couldn't handle responsibility. And then I blamed Vivienne for everything, so I wouldn't have to face my own guilt. I stared at him, shocked. In all our years of marriage and the messy divorce that followed, I had never heard him take responsibility for anything. Celeste reached out to me a few months ago, Thomas continued. She told me about the family history she'd been uncovering, and she asked me point blank about my affair. I lied at first, told her it wasn't serious, that it was just a mistake. But she didn't let me off the hook. She pushed and pushed until I finally admitted the truth. I had been cheating on your mother for 2 years before she found out. I had already decided to leave. I was just looking for the right excuse. Celeste was crying quietly. Nathan's jaw was clenched. When Vivienne told me about her affair with Richard, I was almost relieved. Finally, I had my excuse. I could leave and be the victim. I could tell everyone that she drove me away. And for years, I believed my own lie. But watching my children grow up through occasional phone calls and obligatory visits, I knew the truth. I was the one who left. I was the one who chose a new life over the family I already had. And Vivienne was the one who stayed, who sacrificed, who loved you kids enough for both of us. The silence that followed was profound. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him it was too little, too late, but another part of me, the part that had carried guilt for 28 years, felt something shift. Why now? I finally asked. Why are you saying this now? Because I'm dying, Thomas said simply. The room seemed to tilt. Celeste gasped. Nathan's face went white. I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less, and I realize that I can't die with this lie between us. I can't leave this world with my children believing that their mother was the one who destroyed our family. Vivienne, you've carried my guilt long enough. It's time I took it back. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I just felt sad. Sad for the young couple we had been, so full of hope and promise. Sad for the family we might have been if we had both been braver, better, more honest. Sad that it took a terminal diagnosis for him to finally tell the truth. Thank you, I said quietly. Thank you for telling them. It doesn't make up for anything. I know that. But maybe it's a start. Nathan stood up abruptly and left the room. Emma followed him. Celeste was sobbing openly now, and Marcus was holding her. I sat there, frozen, wondering how my carefully planned Thanksgiving had turned into this emotional minefield. Thomas stood to leave. I should go. I'm sorry for disrupting your dinner. Wait, I said. Nathan will want to talk to you. Give him a minute to process. So Thomas stayed, and eventually Nathan came back. They went outside to talk privately, father and son, having the honest conversation they should have had 20 years ago. Celeste and I cleaned up the kitchen together, working in silence, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of washing dishes and putting away leftovers. I'm sorry, Mom, she said finally. I should have warned you he was coming. Why did you invite him? Because I wanted to see you two in the same room. I wanted to watch how you interacted, see if the story he'd been telling me matched the reality. And within 5 minutes, I could see it. He was nervous, guilty, defensive. You were shocked, but gracious. It told me everything I needed to know about who you both really are. I'm not gracious, baby. I'm just tired of fighting. Maybe that's the same thing. Thomas's confession changed everything. Over the next few weeks, family members who had believed his version of events reached out to apologize. My brother called to say he was sorry for taking sides without knowing the full story. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years sent messages of support. Even Lorraine sent a brief email acknowledging that she had been wrong about me, though she didn't quite manage to actually apologize. But the biggest change was in my relationship with my children. They stopped analyzing every childhood memory for hidden trauma. They stopped blaming me for their adult struggles. They started seeing me as a complete person. Flawed, yes, but also strong and loving and worthy of respect. Nathan and Emma got engaged on Christmas Eve. He asked me to help him pick out the ring, and we spent a wonderful afternoon together, looking at diamonds and talking about his future. He asked for my blessing, which made me cry because I never thought my son would value my opinion enough to ask for it. "I want you to know something, Mom," he said as we left the jewelry store. "Emma and I are going to make mistakes. We're going to fight and disappoint each other and sometimes fall short. But we're going to keep showing up, keep trying, keep loving each other, just like you did. You're the example I want to follow, not the cautionary tale I want to avoid." I squeezed his hand, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. Celeste's relationship with Marcus deepened as well. He proposed 3 months after Nathan and Emma's engagement, in front of the sunset, at the same park where I used to take her and Nathan when they were little. "I want to get married here," she told me afterward. "In this park, because this is where I learned what love looks like. Watching you push us on the swings even though you were exhausted. Watching you pack elaborate picnics even though we were broke. Watching you show up again and again even when things were hard. That's the foundation I want for my marriage." Both weddings happened in the same year, 6 months apart. I stood at Nathan's wedding, watching him dance with Emma, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I stood at Celeste's wedding, watching her marry a man who truly saw her and loved her, and felt like maybe, just maybe, I had done something right. Thomas didn't make it to either wedding. He died 3 months after his Thanksgiving confession, surrounded by the family from his second marriage. Nathan and Celeste went to the funeral, but I didn't. I had forgiven him, but I didn't need to mourn him. That chapter of my life was closed. What surprised me was the grief my children felt. They grieved not for the father they had known, but for the father they might have had if he had been brave enough to stay. They grieved for the relationship that could have been, the family that might have existed if different choices had been made. "It's okay to be sad," I told Nathan after the funeral. "He was your father, and you're allowed to mourn what you've lost. But he was terrible to us, to you. He was human, deeply flawed, but human. You can acknowledge that he hurt you while also acknowledging that you loved him. Both things can be true." These words, "both things can be true," became a kind of mantra for our family. They captured the complexity of our history, the nuance of our relationships, the reality that people are rarely all good or all bad. I started seeing Dr. Reeves, the therapist Patricia had recommended. She helped me work through my own trauma, my own guilt, my own need for validation. I learned that I had been seeking absolution from my children for a mistake that wasn't even primarily mine to carry. "You've been apologizing for 28 years, Dr. Reeves said during one session. What would it feel like to stop? I don't know. It's become such a part of who I am." Exactly. Your guilt has become your identity. What if you let it go? Who would you be without it? I didn't know the answer to that question, but I decided to find out. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do. I stopped over-explaining my decisions. I stopped apologizing for taking up space, for having needs, for being imperfect. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. One afternoon, Celeste called me in tears. She had made a mistake at work, a big one that might cost her a major client. She was spiraling, convinced that she was going to get fired, that her career was over, that she was a failure. "Mom, I don't know what to do," she sobbed. The old me would have tried to fix it, would have taken on her anxiety as my own, would have somehow found a way to make it my fault. Instead, I said, "Baby, You're going to do what we all do when we make mistakes. You're going to acknowledge it, apologize if necessary, learn from it, and move forward. One mistake doesn't define you. But what if they fire me? Then you'll find another job. You're talented and smart and capable. One setback doesn't change that. There was a pause. You really believe that, don't you? That I can handle this? Of course I do. I've always believed in you, Celeste, even when you didn't believe in yourself. She didn't get fired. She fixed her mistake, had an honest conversation with her boss, and actually got praised for how she handled the situation. When she called to tell me, she was almost giddy. I did it, Mom. I messed up, but I fixed it. I didn't fall apart. I didn't blame anyone else. I just handled it. I'm proud of you, baby. I'm proud of me too. That conversation marked another shift. My children stopped calling me every time something went wrong, expecting me to provide comfort by taking on their problems. Instead, they called to tell me how they had handled things themselves, seeking not rescue, but recognition. Nathan faced his own crisis when his company downsized and he lost his job. Instead of spiraling into self-doubt or blaming his childhood insecurities, he took a week to process his feelings and then started networking. He found a better job within 2 months. I thought about what you said, Mom, he told me, about how one setback doesn't define you, about how resilience is a choice. I chose to be resilient. Watching my children become truly independent, truly capable adults was the greatest gift I could have asked for. Better than apologies, better than vindication, better than finally having the truth come out. Seeing them handle life's challenges with grace and strength told me that despite all my mistakes, despite all the things I got wrong, I had somehow managed to give them what they needed most. The belief that they could handle whatever came their way. Patricia and I had coffee one morning, and she asked me how things were going with my kids. Good, I said. Really good. Not perfect, but good. My daughter still isn't speaking to me, she said sadly. It's been over a year now. I'm sorry, Patricia. Don't be. Watching your journey has given me hope. And also permission. Permission for what? Permission to stop trying so hard. Permission to accept that I can't control how my daughter feels about me. Permission to live my life even while she's punishing me for living it wrong 30 years ago. We talked for a long time that morning about the unique pain of being blamed by your adult children, about the impossible standards society holds mothers to, about the freedom that comes from finally letting go of guilt that isn't truly yours to carry. We did our best, Patricia said as we were leaving. That has to be enough. It is enough, I agreed. Whether they see it or not, it's enough. A year after Thomas's death, his second wife reached out to me. Her name was Catherine, and she wanted to meet. I was hesitant, but curious enough to agree. We met at a neutral restaurant, and she was nothing like I had imagined. She was soft-spoken, kind, and deeply sad. I wanted to apologize to you, she said. I knew Thomas was married when we started our affair. I told myself it didn't matter, that he was unhappy, that his marriage was essentially over, but that was a lie I told myself so I wouldn't have to face what I was doing. I didn't know what to say. He never stopped talking about you, Catherine continued. Even years into our marriage, you were always there. The ghost of the wife he betrayed, the family he abandoned. He built our entire relationship on a lie, that you were the villain, and when that lie finally crumbled, so did everything else. He died full of regret, Vivian. Regret for leading his children, regret for blaming you, regret for wasting so much time on pride and stubbornness. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you deserve to know. And because I hope someday my own children will forgive me for the part I played in destroying a family. After she left, I sat in the restaurant for a long time, processing this conversation. I didn't feel vindicated or victorious. I just felt sad for all of us. for the young couple Thomas and I had been, for Catherine, who had built her life on someone else's marriage, for all the children caught in the crossfire of adult mistakes. But I also felt something else. Closure. Thomas had confessed his guilt to our children before he died, and now his second wife had confessed hers to me. The circle was complete. The truth was finally fully out. When I got home, I went to my painting studio and looked at the landscape I had finished months ago. The one with the mountains and the sunset. The one I had completed the day Celeste squeezed my hand under the table. I had thought it was my best work, but now I wanted to create something new, something that captured not just beauty but also truth. I started a new piece. This one showed a woman standing alone on a cliff, looking out at a vast ocean. The woman's face wasn't visible. She could be anyone, any age, any background. But her posture was strong, her stance was grounded, and in the distance, you could see the faint outline of a shore. The painting took me 3 months to complete, and when it was done, I titled it After the Storm. It wasn't about perfection or vindication or even forgiveness. It was about survival, about standing firm after everything has tried to knock you down, about finding your footing when the ground beneath you has shifted. Celeste saw it first. She came over for coffee one Sunday morning, and I showed her the finished piece. She stared at it for a long time without speaking. Finally, she said, "That's you, isn't it? Standing there after everything that happened." "It's all of us," I said. "Everyone who's been blamed, everyone who's been hurt, everyone who's survived things they weren't sure they could survive. It's about still being here, still standing, still looking toward the horizon, even when you're not sure what's out there." "It's beautiful, Mom." "Thank you, baby." She turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry I almost broke you. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to prove your worth as a mother." "You didn't break me, Celeste. You challenged me, you hurt me sometimes, but you also helped me grow. I'm stronger now than I was before all of this started. I know myself better. I know my worth better. And I know that being your mother is the greatest privilege of my life, even when it's hard." We held each other for a long time, mother and daughter, both of us scarred, but healing. Both of us imperfect, but trying. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Because every woman who finds her voice helps another woman find hers. And together, we're creating something powerful. Life settled into a new normal after that. Nathan and Emma had their first baby, a daughter they named Vivienne Rose. When Nathan called to tell me they had chosen my name, I cried for an hour straight. "We want her to have the strength her grandmother has," Nathan said. "The resilience, the love, the ability to keep going even when things are impossibly hard. That's the legacy we want for our daughter." Being a grandmother was a joy I hadn't expected. Holding little Vivienne Rose in my arms, I felt both the weight of the past and the hope of the future. I looked at this tiny human and thought about all the mistakes I would watch Nathan and Emma make as parents, all the imperfect decisions, all the times they would fall short of their own ideals. And I realized that I could give them something my children's generation had seemed to lack: grace. Grace to be imperfect, grace to make mistakes, grace to be human. "You're going to mess up," I told Nathan one day while I was babysitting. "You're going to lose your temper when you're exhausted. You're going to say things you don't mean. You're going to make decisions that seem right at the time but look questionable 20 years later. And that's okay. That's what parenting is. How do I make sure I don't damage her the way we felt damaged?" You can't. You're going to impact her, shape her, influence her in ways you can't predict or control. But here's the thing, Nathan. Your job isn't to give her a perfect childhood. Your job is to love her, to show up for her, and to teach her that she has the strength to handle whatever challenges life throws at her. Peace, youths. Call me gentle. When did you get so wise? Celeste got pregnant 6 months later, and she called me in a panic. Mom, I don't know if I can do this. What if I mess up? What if I become like... She stopped. Like me? I finished gently. No, that's not what I meant. It's okay, baby. For a long time, that would have been the worst thing you could imagine. But I hope you do become like me. I hope you love your child fiercely, even when you're tired. I hope you sacrifice for them, even when it's hard. I hope you show up again and again, even when you're not perfect, because that's what real love looks like. I'm scared, Mom. Of course you are. Being responsible for another human's life is terrifying. But you're ready. You're more ready than you think. Will you help me when the baby comes? I'll be there as much or as little as you want me to be. This is your journey, Celeste. I'm just honored to be part of it. Both of my children were entering new chapters, and I realized that I was too. At 55, I was no longer defined by my role as a mother. I was Vivian Torres, artist, friend, grandmother, woman. I had survived a betrayal, a divorce, decades of guilt, and the near loss of my children. And I had emerged stronger. I started teaching painting classes at the local community center. My students were mostly women my age or older, many of them dealing with their own family struggles, their own feelings of inadequacy, their own battles with adult children who blamed them for everything. I didn't directly tell them my story, but it informed everything I taught. I encouraged them to express their pain through art, to create something beautiful from their struggles, to find their own voice, even when everyone around them was trying to define who they should be. One of my students, a woman named Gloria, stayed after class one evening. Can I ask you something personal? Strong, how do you have so much peace? I can see it in you, in your paintings, in the way you teach. But my life is chaos. My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 2 years. My son blames me for his divorce. My ex-husband turned my whole family against me. How did you find peace when everything was falling apart? Strong, I thought carefully about my answer. I stopped waiting for other people to give me permission to be okay. I stopped believing that my worth was determined by whether my children approved of me. I stopped carrying guilt that wasn't mine to carry. And I started creating something, art, relationships, a life, that was mine, that no one could take away from me. It sounds impossible. That sounds impossible. It felt impossible at first, but it got easier. And Gloria, you're already doing it. You're here, in this class, creating something beautiful. That's the first step. Strong. She cried, and I held her, and I saw myself in her pain. I saw the woman I had been 2 years ago, drowning in accusations and guilt, believing that I was the problem. Strong. The truth is that I was never the problem. I was a human being who made human mistakes, who loved imperfectly but deeply, who survived things that could have broken me. And that was enough. Strong. Marcus and Celeste had their baby in the spring, a son named Thomas Marcus, after both grandfathers. I held him for the first time and felt the weight of that name, the complicated legacy it carried. Strong. Are you okay with us naming him after Dad? Celeste asked nervously. Yes, baby. I'm okay with it. Your father was a flawed man who made terrible choices, but he was still your father. And maybe this little one will carry the name with more honor than either of his grandfathers did. That's generous of you, Mom. It's honest. I'm not angry at your father anymore, Celeste. I'm not angry at anyone. I'm just grateful to be here, to have you and Nathan, to meet these beautiful grandchildren. Everything else is just history. Watching my children become parents was surreal. I saw them make the same mistakes I had made, losing their tempers when the baby wouldn't stop crying, feeling overwhelmed by the responsibility, questioning every decision. But I also saw them extend to themselves the grace I had finally learned to give myself. Nathan called me one night, exhausted and frustrated. Vivian Rose has been crying for 3 hours straight. I've tried everything. I'm losing my mind, Mom. How did you do this? I did exactly what you're doing. I tried everything, felt helpless when nothing worked, and somehow survived until the next day. That's parenting, Nathan. It's showing up even when you don't know what you're doing. I yelled at Emma earlier. I was so tired and so frustrated, and I snapped at her about something stupid. Now I feel terrible. Did you apologize? Of course. Then you're already doing better than most of us did. Your generation is so much more aware, so much more conscious of your impact on others. But don't let that awareness become another source of guilt. You're human. You're allowed to have bad moments. Thanks, Mom, for understanding, for not judging. I would never judge you for being human, Nathan. I spent too many years being judged for the same thing. These conversations with my children as parents healed something in me. They were living proof that imperfect parenting doesn't doom children to misery. They were thriving, loving, creating families of their own. And yes, they made mistakes, but they were also resilient, capable, and full of love. Dr. Reeves and I had our final session around this time. I had been seeing her for 2 years, and we both agreed that I had done the work I needed to do. "What's different now?" she asked. "How do you feel when you think about your past, your mistakes, your relationship with your children?" she asked. "I feel at peace," I said. "Not because everything is perfect, it's not. But because I've accepted that I'm not responsible for perfection. I did my best. Some of my choices were good, some were questionable. One was genuinely bad. But all of them were made by a person who was trying, who was learning, who was doing the best she could with the resources and understanding she had at the time." "And your children, how do you feel about them?" "Proud, grateful. They're extraordinary people. And while I hope I had something to do with that, I also recognize that they made themselves who they are. I gave them a foundation, but they built the house." Dr. Reeves smiled. "That's beautiful, Vivian. You've come a long way." "I have, and I owe a lot of that to you. You did the work. I just provided the space for you to do it." We hugged goodbye, and I left her office feeling lighter than I had in years. The burden I had carried for so long, the guilt, the shame, the desperate need for approval, was finally gone. A few months later, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Richard, my ex-husband's former business partner, the man I had the affair with nearly 30 years ago. I hadn't seen or spoken to him since shortly after the divorce. "Vivienne," he said when I opened the door. "I hope it's okay that I came. I've been wanting to talk to you for years, but I didn't know if you'd want to see me." I invited him in, curious about what had brought him to my door after all this time. "I heard about Tana's passing," he said, "and I heard that the truth about what happened came out. I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry for my part in it." "Richard, it was a long time ago. I know, but I've carried guilt about it for 3 decades. I was Thomas's friend, and I betrayed that friendship. I took advantage of your vulnerability when you needed support, not another complication. And then I watched you carry all the blame while I walked away with my reputation intact. What do you want from me? Forgiveness? No, I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You were hurting. You were betrayed. You were desperate for someone to make you feel valued. And I used that for my own selfish purposes. I'm sorry." I looked at this man, older now, grayer, but still recognizable as the person who had been so present during one of the darkest times of my life. I felt no anger, no resentment, no pain, just a distant sadness for all of us, for the mistakes we had made, for the lives we had complicated. "I forgive you, Richard, not because you deserve it, but because I'm done carrying anger. You were a small part of a much larger story, and that story is over now." He looked relieved and surprised. "Thank you. You're more gracious than I expected. I'm just tired of holding grudges. Life's too short." After he left, I realized something important. I had forgiven everyone. Thomas for his betrayal, Richard for his selfishness, Lorraine for her lies, my children for their accusations, and most importantly, myself for my mistakes. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean what happened was okay. It just meant I was no longer willing to let the past steal my present. Patricia called that evening, and I told her about Richard's visit. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I said. "For the first time in my adult life, I feel completely free." "My daughter called me today," Patricia said. After 18 months of silence, she called. "Oh, Patricia, what did she say?" "She said she missed me, that she had been so focused on her anger that she forgot about the love, that she wanted to try to rebuild our relationship." "And how do you feel?" "Cautiously hopeful, but also different than I was before. I'm not going to accept blame for everything like I used to. I'm not going to apologize for being human. I learned that from watching you." We talked for over an hour, two mothers who had survived the trenches of adult-child conflict, who had learned that loving your children and protecting your own peace aren't mutually exclusive, who had discovered that being imperfect is not the same as being inadequate. The years that followed were good ones. Nathan and Emma had a second child, a son they named Marcus Thomas, combining both families, both legacies. Celeste and Marcus had a daughter, Amelia Rose. I spent my days painting, teaching, loving my grandchildren, and enjoying a peace I had never thought possible. I won't pretend that everything was perfect. There were still difficult moments. Celeste sometimes slipped back into old patterns, analyzing some childhood memory for hidden meanings. Nathan occasionally referenced his commitment issues, though now he did it with humor rather than accusation. But these moments were brief, and we had learned to navigate them without falling back into old wounds. One Sunday, we had a family dinner. Me, my children, their spouses, all 4 grandchildren. It was chaos in the most beautiful way. Children laughing and crying and spilling things. Adults talking over each other, sharing stories, making jokes. At one point, little Vivian Rose came over and climbed into my lap. She was 3 years old, with her father's eyes and her mother's determination. "Grandma, tell me a story," she demanded. "What kind of story?" I asked. "A true one, about when you were young," she replied. I looked around the table at my family. Imperfect, complicated, beautiful. I thought about all the stories I could tell, all the pain and struggle and mistakes. But I also thought about the love, the resilience, the survival. "When I was young," I said, "I made a lot of mistakes, but I also never gave up, even when things were really hard. And eventually things got better. That's the most important story anyone can tell you, little one. No matter how hard things get, they can get better." "Did you have magic?" she asked. "No, baby. I didn't have magic. I just had love and determination and the belief that tomorrow could be better than today. And you know what? That was enough." She seemed satisfied with this answer and ran off to play with her cousins. Nathan caught my eye and smiled. Celeste reached over and squeezed my hand. In that moment, surrounded by the family I had almost lost, the grandchildren I had feared I might never meet, the life I had painstakingly rebuilt from ashes, I felt complete. I am Vivian Torres. I am 57 years old. I made mistakes. I was betrayed. I survived. I healed. I forgave. I created a life that is mine, that reflects my values, that honors my truth. I am not perfect. I never was. I never will be. And that is more than enough. Looking back at the woman I was 5 years ago, drowning in accusations and guilt, I barely recognize her. That woman believed her worth was determined by her children's approval. That woman carried everyone's pain as her own. That woman apologized for taking up space in the world. The woman I am now knows better. I know that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself on the altar of their expectations. I know that being a good mother doesn't require perfection, just presence. I know that my mistakes don't define me. My resilience does. I think about all the women who are where I was, blamed by their adult children, drowning in guilt, questioning every decision they ever made. I want them to know that there is another side to this pain. There is healing, there's peace, there's the possibility of healthy relationships built on truth instead of convenient lies. But that healing requires something difficult. It requires you to stop accepting blame that isn't yours, to stop apologizing for being human, to stop sacrificing your peace for your children's comfort. It requires you to believe that you are enough, even when everyone around you is saying you're not. It requires you to trust that you did your best, even when your best wasn't perfect. It requires you to accept that your children's struggles are theirs to work through, not yours to fix. This is not about being cold or uncaring. This is about recognizing that the greatest gift you can give your adult children is the belief that they are strong enough to handle their own lives. And the greatest gift you can give yourself is permission to live yours. My art has changed over these years. My paintings are lighter now, full of color and movement and life. They're still honest. They still reflect struggle and pain, but they also reflect hope and healing and the beautiful complexity of being human. I had a gallery show last year, my first ever. All of my children came, brought the grandchildren, invited their friends. As I stood there, surrounded by my paintings, surrounded by my family, I felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with being a mother and everything to do with being myself. Celeste gave a speech that night, standing in front of a room full of people, talking about her mother, me, with pride in her voice. "My mother is one of the strongest people I know," she said. "Not because she never fell down, but because she always got back up. Not because she never made mistakes, but because she owned them without letting them define her. Not because she was perfect, but because she was real. These paintings you see around you, they're not just art. They're proof that it's never too late to find yourself, to create something beautiful, to build a life that matters." I cried, of course, happy tears this time. Nathan added, "Our mother taught us resilience by living it. She taught us strength by surviving things that could have broken her. She taught us love by showing up again and again, even when we didn't make it easy. We're the people we are today because she refused to give up on us, even when we had given up on her." After everyone left and I was alone in the gallery, I stood in front of my painting After the Storm, the woman on the cliff, looking out at the ocean, standing strong after everything had tried to knock her down. That woman was me, and she was every woman who had survived betrayal, blame, and hardship, and the impossible standards we set for mothers. She was every woman who had made mistakes and chosen to heal instead of hiding. She was every woman who had learned that being imperfect is not the same as being inadequate. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel, and tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Because every woman who finds her voice helps another woman find hers, and together we're creating something powerful. Your story matters. Your truth matters. You matter. As I lock up the gallery that night and walk to my car under a sky full of stars, I think about the journey I've been on. From that Tuesday morning when Celeste first called with her accusations to this moment of triumph and peace. It wasn't a straight path. There were detours and setbacks, revelations and reversals. There was pain I thought would break me and healing I didn't think was possible. There were truths that needed to come out and lies that needed to be exposed. There were relationships that almost shattered and bonds that became stronger for being tested. But through it all, I learned the most important lesson of my life. You cannot heal what you will not acknowledge, and you cannot grow what you will not release. I had to acknowledge my mistakes, all of them, even the ones that were small, and the one that was big. I had to acknowledge my pain, my betrayal, my desperate attempts to be perfect when perfect doesn't exist. I had to acknowledge that I had carried guilt that wasn't mine, that I had let others define my worth, that I had been drowning in apologies for simply being human. And then I had to release it. Release the guilt, the shame, the desperate need for approval. Release the belief that my children's struggles were my fault. Release the idea that good mothers don't make mistakes. Release the past so I could finally live in the present. This is what I want every woman to know. You are not responsible for being perfect. You are not responsible for your adult children's happiness. You are not responsible for fixing every problem, healing every wound, or atoning forever for mistakes you made decades ago. You are responsible for showing up with love, even when it's imperfect. You are responsible for being honest, even when the truth is complicated. You are responsible for your own healing, your own peace, your own life. And that is enough. You are enough. I am Vivian Torres. I am 57 years old. I am an artist, a mother, a grandmother, a survivor. I made mistakes and I made masterpieces. I hurt people and I healed them. I failed and I succeeded. I fell down and I got back up. I am human, beautifully, perfectly, messily human. And I am finally at peace with that. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Thank you for listening to my truth. Thank you for being part of this community of women who understand that our imperfections are not weaknesses. They're proof that we're real, that we're trying, that we're alive. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. Be proud of your journey. And remember that being an imperfect mother who loved fiercely is not something to apologize for. It's something to celebrate. Your peace matters. Your truth matters. You matter. And that is the truest thing I know.